Hello everybody, Thursdays again, and this is Think Differently Thursday. Just great to be doing this every week. It feels like a real privilege and I get to chat to so many different people. And so today I'm chatting to Emily. Hi Em.
Hiya.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I always want to ask you about your clothes. This isn't something I thought I was going to ask you. Emily, you just always seem to wear different clothes. Do you ever wear the same thing twice? It's just like...
Yes, I do. So people won't know this. In our office, we do have somebody that we work with, Rebecca Warnock, who never wears the same outfit twice.
She
Whereas,
doesn't.
no, I'm always wearing the same clothes.
Oh, I just think you just feel like you've got this vast wardrobe of amazing clothes.
No, I don't have a vast wardrobe, though Dave would definitely say I have too many clothes. But yeah.
That's a girl boy thing. That's what boys say. They don't need many, do they? A few black t-shirts.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Emily, I was thinking, I first started doing Think Differently Thursday back in that first lockdown last March, when we immediately tried to get some online content out during the week when we couldn't meet together as church. And little did I know that come the start of a new year, 2021, I would still be doing this. It just seems incredible. And we're all saying it, aren't we? But when you look back on 2020, how would you summarize it? How was 2020 for you?
I think it's really easy for me to see 2020 in lots of different ways. One is sometimes I think, oh, it's just been a year and it feels like it's gone in a whirlwind and I've lost a year, is sometimes how I feel about it, that I've lost a year, because it hasn't been marked and punctuated by the normal events that would happen in a year. But when I actually stop and look back, 2020 was a year where it definitely had some of my lowest lows, definitely my lowest lows, with my own mental health, within family relationships. It was one of the lowest things. But I also look back and I can see that there have been some really amazing things in 2020. So for us as a family, we've had more family time together. I've had more time with the boys. So I'm a mum of two boys, Finn and Riley. Finn's 6 and Riley is 4. We've had some adventures. So we were able to go on holiday in the summer holiday and we had great time on that. But also we've bought a van, which my husband Dave is doing up as a camper van. And so that's a huge step for me. That's a huge trust step. That's a huge just a dream that he's had for ages that he's been able to do. And so 2020, actually, when I look back at it, even though I had some of the lowest lows, I actually would say it's been one of the better and best years that we've had because of how I've grown and learned through it, I think I would say. So
Wow, that is amazing to be able to summarize it like that. I'm loving the van conversions. I often see on Instagram where we're up to and what's happening, because he's converting it, isn't it? Making it into like a van that you'll take away and stay in. My brother did it, and so I'm very interested to see the progress.
It is amazing. So he promised, so Finn's birthday is in a week and a half's time, and he promised Finn that we'd be able to sleep in it by then. So he's really pushing hard to get at least a bed in there that we can sleep in some sorts. But he's doing all the electrical wiring at the moment. But yeah, it was just a plain white van, empty inside, and he's making it into a camper van.
It is very exciting, very exciting. I think you're very honest, and you often talk about some of your struggles, and you have just alluded to it there that in many ways the year has been hard. And I don't know if we've actually said that you are part of our staff team at the Forge, and so sometimes you speak as well. And when you spoke recently, you did speak about some of those struggles, and you particularly were saying about how hard you'd found homeschooling in that first lockdown, which is really interesting for me because I'm a teacher, and so I see it from that perspective. So, you said you've got 2 young boys. What is that whole being mum at home, homeschooling? What is that actually like?
I want to say that it's like being absolutely annihilated every single day, which sounds really extreme. And I do have to say that this is my experience of homeschooling. There are lots of people out there who probably are wonderfully patient and really relaxed about stuff. I'm just not somebody who is like that in my parenting style. And so homeschooling is like being annihilated. It's like trying to constantly imagine if you in your job spent your entire day trying to persuade somebody to do something that they didn't want to do, and you're constantly coaxing and persuading and bribing. It just feels unrelenting. And then you've got to mix into that the fact that you've got two of them to do that with. You're fielding sibling arguments, you're fielding all of that whilst you're trying to learn. Yeah, so there's that side, and I kind of say it with a smile, but definitely in that first March to July time, that's how it felt. It felt like it was unrelenting and constant arguments, persuasion, badgering, trying everything you can do to get somebody to do something they don't like.
I think I can slightly imagine, because my kids are, as you know, grown up now, but when Jack was young, we were doing some extra stuff, which was Kumon. Honestly, everything you're describing there it was my experience, and it was all around him not wanting to do it. And I think with me as well, there was just such a huge amount of frustration knowing that we could probably do it in 10 minutes. It could be done in 10 minutes. And yet it was it was a really horrible experience. And actually I abandoned it because I honestly felt that my relationship with him and what it was doing to us was not worth it. I did not want that to be part of his memory of growing up, and we abandoned it. But of course, you can't do that with homeschooling, and so I feel your pain with kids that don't want to do it. Yeah, I get it.
But you kind of say you can't do it, but there's part of me that was some of the learning that I had to do. Was I realised. And I'm really grateful that I've realised this when Finn is 6 and not when he's 13 or 14. I realised that a lot of my pushing him to do it to a certain standard was more about me than it was actually about him. It was my, I'm a people pleaser. I'm somebody who wants to achieve well, and what people think of me and my achievements matters. And so there's a sense of when the teacher looked at where he was going back in July or September, that reflected on me. And I never was this conscious. It wasn't like you're not doing it and it reflects badly on me. This was all running subconsciously below the level, but that's what was pushing my stress levels, was this sense of, well, I will have failed. If you haven't done this and done this well, I have failed at being your mum and your teacher at this time, because that's now my responsibility. And so one of the things I really had to learn was how to separate what was my responsibility about his learning or the standard of his work with what was his responsibility. And it's enough for me to be able to say, I need to make you do this, or you should try to do this. But whether you finished this or not, and to what standard you finished it, that's up to you. That's not down to me. And if you present this to your teacher, that reflects on him, not on me. And that sounds really harsh, but that's kind of what I had to get to, is like, actually, I need to step back and I need to separate myself from your achievements in this, which as a parent, you don't often get to have that, like butting up very quickly until they're often teenagers, when you're forcing them to do exams or revision or that type of thing. And so I am grateful that I had to unpick my own subconscious thoughts of that to be able to stand back, so that hopefully through his learning, I no longer push him to the same extent that I would do, because actually it was about me rather than about him. So And
I completely get that, and I think that is what you discover year after year with parenting, that they are their own person and they are different to you. That's so interesting. So
from each other. They're different from each other. So Riley is 4, and the difference this time round is that Riley wasn't being homeschooled last time, and now he is being homeschooled in this one. He's now at school, and seeing that they like different things, they engage differently, they learn differently, and that's great to know that that's about them, not me.
Yeah, definitely. So does that mean that you've applied lots of that to this time round? Are you finding yourself doing it really quite differently this time?
Yeah, so I think I'm really fortunate in lots of ways this time around. One is that they've been able to go into school a little bit over the
Okay.
term, so that's given me space. So that whole sense of it being unrelenting isn't so true. It's like, actually, no, I get to have days where I'm working, and I don't
Yeah.
have somebody there that I'm trying to juggle work with. But also, yeah, I've done things slightly differently. Things like we've set up a small schoolroom in our playroom. So instead of doing it at the dining room table, where I felt it was better to do it because Riley was on the floor playing and I could feel like he was involved and he wasn't left by himself too much last time. Actually, what ended up happening was he was just a distraction all the time for Finn. And also then Riley didn't feel like he was being played with because he could see us there. Whereas it's like, no, there's a definite cut off. This is our school time. We're in here. Now we come and play and we're in here. And that's been really, really good. But also, one of the things I'd forgotten is they're almost a year round. And so being that year older, Finn's a little bit more aware and attentive of like, no, I do want to do this. And Riley's like, oh, actually, I'm at school and this is exciting. So they're slightly more interested in it.
Right.
But yeah, no, definitely, I'm still having to bribe. There are times when I've cried, less times than last time, but most of the time where I'm like, oh, just do it. Why can't you do it? Type element. And then I'm like, take a step back and I'm like, Emily, just take a step back. That's about you, not him. Yeah, so yeah, I've changed things. It is better, but there are definitely moments when there are tears from both of us or all of us, and times when we're like, we just need to be in different rooms. So yeah.
That's interesting about creating that space as well, because I think that goes across the board. I think that's adults as well. Adults that are working from home, I think, are finding it difficult because how do you separate home from work? And if your dining room tables become your office and then you're going to have your dinner and where's your leisure space, I think it's a difficult thing, isn't it? Just like those worlds blurring in a way that they didn't used to. You used to like travel to and from work, and that was almost your buffer as well. That was where you separate out those things. And yeah, really tricky, really tricky. Do you think your boys, I think children very much are in the here and now, aren't they? So this is their world. This is what they know. This is how life is right now. Do you think with them there's a kind of acceptance of that, or they're not aware particularly of what they're missing, or do you think they are missing things and people?
I think my boys and I think children across the board are missing things. And I think the harder thing is, as an adult, we'd be able to hopefully say, oh, I recognize I missed this thing. With kids, they might not be able to articulate that they're missing it, but it will come out in other ways. It will come out in bad behavior, or it will come out in, just playing up a little bit more. So I can see that whilst my boys actually really like a lot of the being at home, a lot more family time, they've loved that. And I've seen really great things about, like, they play better together. Their bonding, their brotherhood, their sense of brotherhood has definitely like developed. So that
I've heard that
team
from quite a lot of people, where the siblings would have been separated because of schooling. They're together, and they're together at a time where they wouldn't have been, and they've developed this kind of lovely bond.
this kind of like team sort of sense. And definitely they've got that. But they're missing their grandparents, and they miss going. So I've got a twin sister who lives down in Reading. I've got an older sister who lives in Durham, and we're very close as a family, so we're close to my nieces and my nephews, and they miss seeing them. And so they're like, when can we go and see Auntie Ali? When can we see Megan and Caitlin? So they miss seeing people, particularly grandparents, because both grandparents are local, and they would normally see them quite often. So they're missing that.
I spoke to my brother and sister-in-law at the weekend, and they've got 4-year-olds, and were saying that similarly, I think, to what you're saying, she wouldn't be able to say, I'm missing seeing my friends, but when they play games with her, she calls them friend. She's pretending that her mum and dad are her friends. So she says, come on, friend, you do this. And so she is missing her friends, but without being able to, as you say, articulate it. I think there'll be quite long-term consequences, won't there, for lots of children and all of us, I think, about this time. What about you, Em? What are you missing?
So I'm missing my parents. So like, I was talking to my mum on Friday, and was like, we were counting on our hands. I was like, I think I've been in your house or on your property 4 times in the last year. And like I say, they're local, so we'd normally pop in. and play around their house or have tea around their house. And so I miss seeing my parents and being able to be in their house and relax in their house. I miss seeing my sisters and my nieces and nephews. I saw a photo of my nephew who's going to be 7 on Friday, and I was like, he's just grown up so much, and even just a few months since I last saw him. I miss going out for date nights with my hubby, so that's sort of going out and being somewhere different, having a meal. There's lots of things. But I was talking to Mum and said, actually, one of the things that I miss, and it kind of covers all of those things, is I miss options. Like at the moment, it's like home, and it's maybe a walk or a cycle ride, but it's like I don't have the option of I want to go to the cinema or to bowling or swimming with my kids, or or an option to see a grandparent today, or or even travel a lot further than 10 miles down the road really to do an activity. I'm missing the options in life, so variety is what I'm missing.
And isn't it amazing that we never knew that we were just so fortunate that we always could make those decisions. We could just have spontaneity, we could just decide where we were going, what we were doing, and to have it taken away is just incredible, isn't it? Something we never thought we'd live through. I miss all those things too. When you were talking recently, and I've heard you in other contexts talk about this as well, I've just found it really interesting. You talked about resetting almost your relationship with God. Now, I know you're a Christian, but you were talking about actually in 2020 doing something quite differently about how you were approaching your relationship with God. So first of all, why was that? What was it about 2020? What led to you kind of deciding, I've got to do this relationship with God thing differently?
I think, kind of like I said at the start, 2020 had some of my lowest lows. Just, I think, homeschooling and that sort of self-awareness of how I was behaving with my children. Was I being the person that I wanted to be? Stuff that, when you go to work, you put on your best self most of the time, or most of us do. We kind of like, this is my best self to show to my work colleagues and to everybody that engages with me. And then we come home and we kind of take that off, and the reality hits, and we can be the grumpy one, or we can be the over emotional one, the stressed one. And just not being able to escape that environment meant I was faced with seeing who I was a large proportion of the time under a stressful situation. And I think I just reached a real breaking point of realizing I don't want to be this person anymore. This is not who I want to be, but yet this is who I feel like I can't escape from being. I cannot escape from being the person who's in tears or shouting. Like, I never want to shout at my kids, but I am now shouting, and that's a regular daily occurrence. And I just found myself lacking in the things that I really wanted, or wanted to see in myself, and not knowing how to change them. And so I think I said, when I talked a few weeks ago, that what I found myself doing was I put the kids to bed, and then I would just find myself crying, being like, I don't want to be this person anymore. Jesus, will you help me? And then I'd wake up and I'd kind of start again, and the day would be a bit better, but nothing really had changed. I'd prayed that prayer and I'd asked him to change me, but actually nothing really had changed about how I was approaching life. And for me, one of the things that made a real difference was kind of almost, this is preceded by a 2019 experience. So some stuff happened in 2019, and as a result of that, Dave, my husband, was getting up every morning really early, and he was spending a lot of time with God. And I saw this amazing transformation in him because of his diligence to get up and have time with God. And alongside that, for completely different reasons, a good friend of mine, Nettie Walden, who we heard her story 2 weeks ago at church about prayer and stuff, she was also going through a tough time, and she was spending a lot more time praying with God and spending time with God. And so in 2019, I had these two completely separate stories of two people who were intentionally seeking out and having time with God. One very early in the morning, one when their kids were at school, and just having that solitude and time. And the difference that I saw in their lives and how they spoke about life and how they handled life was enormous. And so when I was at this breaking point, it was like, I need to do something different. And here's an example that two people have shown me of something that's made a difference to their life. And it's not the first time I've done it. You know, before kids, when you have lots more time on your hands, I used to get up early again, and I would have a quiet time in the mornings with God. But then I had two children that woke up and would need feeding. And then it was like that just went out the window for 6 years. And so what I've really done is gone back to a habit that I had 6 years ago before kids. And I get up early and I spend time reading my Bible and praying with God. And that has it genuinely has completely changed my life, like utterly changed my life.
Wow. And we talk about it, don't we? We talk about that our faith is built on this relationship with Jesus. And we talk about what we need for relationship to work well. We know it in our human relationships that they don't work if we don't invest time in them, if we don't sit, if we don't listen. And yet we just so often get this wrong in our relationship with God, don't we? That sounds amazing. So you've developed new patterns. So what are the outcomes? What are you finding has been the differences?
So I lead a 10-month group, a 10-week group, and I was preparing the session that I'm going to do tonight. And there's this brilliant phrase that a guy called Andy Stanley says in one of the talks. So the series we're looking at is something called "In the Meantime," and in this session he says this quote, and I just thought, oh, that just encapsulates this past year for me. He says, "Embracing your inability is a prerequisite to experiencing Christ's ability." So it's actually only when, so I'll say again, embracing your inability is a prerequisite to experiencing Christ's ability. So there's quite a famous quote that says, you know, when I'm weak, you are strong. That's a quote that we often quote as Christians. It's from a book in the Bible called 2 Corinthians. And it's around that. But there's something about when we realize that we're not enough, that we experience the power of Jesus being enough for us. And so for me, that's what's changed and has been an outcome from it, is this kind of almost daily awareness that I am not enough. I'm unlikely to be enough today. I'm still likely to shout at my kids when I lose it. I'm likely to get stressed, but Jesus is enough. And what's more, he's given me the Holy Spirit in me, who is working on changing me and will give me what I need. So recently on Fridays with Fenning, Steve's been going through the fruits of the Spirit. And so when I first sat down and I started reading my Bible really intentionally again in the mornings, two things I did was, one, I chose to read one of the Gospels, because I was like, I need to reconnect with Jesus and I really need to learn about him specifically. And obviously the whole Bible is about Jesus, but I really wanted to look at how he behaved and what he taught when he was on earth. So I read that. And within it, I looked at the Sermon on the Mount, and that kind of made me think about the fruits of the Spirit and what is it that we get from this relationship with Jesus. And it's, you know, it's like joy, peace, patience, love, kindness, gentleness, all the things I wasn't and I wasn't experiencing in my parenting, but all the things that come out of living with Jesus. And so this is one of the things that I've had to learn, is it's not like, oh, I'm doing my quiet time and now I'm going to pretend that I'm patient and I'm happy and I'm joyful and that I have this love and this patience. Fruit comes out of something. It isn't something I make or manufacture. It grows out of something. And so it's like this fruit grows out of the time that I have with Jesus. When I spend that time with him, listening to him and talking to him, then I find that when I then approach the day, I feel like he's with me. And then totally supernaturally, I just find I have more patience. So like, I only get up on Mondays, Tuesdays and Wednesdays and do this, which I may well change because I'm then homeschooling on Thursdays and Fridays. And it's noticeable to me that I have so much more patience with my kids on Mondays, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, but on Thursdays and Fridays, I don't. And like, that's not like a superstitious thing, like I'm going to get up because I want to avoid being impatient. It's like, no, this is a fruit of the time that I spend with you, God, that you produce this in me.
Yeah.
And so, and it's like this outpouring of what I do there just feeds my daily life. So it always surprises me that what I read speaks into what I am going through in that moment. So like I could read it 3 months down the line and it probably still would speak into what's going on then. Like God uses it to actually speak to me, but more than that, he uses it to speak to other people as well. So when we weren't in this lockdown, there was times when I'd meet up for people with coffee or would chat to them, and then there would be something in the conversation that I'd be like, I was reading about that this morning, and there'd be something that wasn't just about this was something for me, it was something I also could give to somebody else. Has been like, did you know God says this about you or about your situation? Because that's what I was reading today. And so what's changed is, I suppose, like, that's a very long answer to your question. I just feel like embracing my inability has just allowed me to experience Christ's ability. Like Andy Stanley says, Christ's ability to do something in me, to do something in the lives of other people. I see Jesus' grace and love and compassion and power and strength in my inability, but also for other people as well. So yeah, that's what's changed.
It's so great to hear, and I think if people are listening, it's such an important thing for people to hear from you as well. It's so much what we're about as church. We just want people to find Jesus and to discover what life with him is. And I love that you're not saying that and then everything was wonderful. You're not saying that homeschooling suddenly was a beautiful experience. You're not saying the circumstances around you have changed, but you're saying that walking closely with Jesus and allowing him to be all that is the input in your life allows you to do life differently. And that's what we want people to hear, isn't it? That we believe this life with Jesus is one to be sought after. And we say it sometimes, if you're listening and it would be good to talk to Emily or me, or just contact us at The Forge, we would love to help you discover who Jesus is.
Definitely. Yeah,
I love that, Emily. Carry on.
I was just going to say, I think one of the things that's hardest for so many of us is Christianity can very easily become a thing that we have to do. Like, we're supposed to be this type of person, and if we're a Christian, then we behave in this particular kind of way. And one of the journeys that I've been on in the past sort of 2 years is realizing the amazing depth of God's love when we are completely at the end of ourselves, when we have messed up in a way like we can never eradicate. That God's love is still there with us, and he will still love you in there, but rebuild you from that place as well. That there is restitution there. And for me, that's what the gospel is. That's what being with Jesus is about. It isn't about being the best version of yourself. It's actually about acknowledging that you are often the worst version of yourself, but God loves you and he has a better plan for you than that. And I think so often we feel like we can't bring that to Jesus. We can't bring our mess up to him because somehow we have to be better than that for him. Well, that completely is the wrong message, because the whole message is we don't have to be better. He's better for us. And that's the power. That's where it's like, I will revel in my weakness, because in my weakness then you are strong. Like that's the whole message of that. But sorry.
And I wouldn't want us, and I think you do it so well because you speak about your vulnerabilities. I wouldn't want people ever to think that we are people that have arrived. I've still got my struggles. I've still got my questions and wrestling with stuff now. I think it's a journey, and I don't want people to think, as you say, you've got to be at this point to be able to come into relationship with Jesus. He just says, come as you are. I love that. I love your story. I love your honesty with it as well, and excited for you. Just excited that this is the path that life is taking. It's brilliant. Are you looking ahead into this year, are you a goal setting sort of person, Emily? Have you started 2021 with other than getting the camper van all sorted? Are you someone that has got goals and targets and that sort of thing for the year?
No, I was on Unpacked Lunch a couple of weeks ago, and I'm not somebody who has New Year's resolutions because I'm terrible at keeping them. A couple of years ago, I remember talking to Johnny Abbott about, he had this thing where he was like, he prayed and asked, chose sort of 3 words that he wanted to kind of work on for the year.
Right.
And I thought, oh, that's a great idea. And so about 3 years ago, I did that. And I don't think I've got them quite nailed yet. So every year I've still got the same words. Yeah. So I want to be more kind and more generous and more courageous. And so for me, those are every year, it's just reminding myself that's who I want to be. I want to be more kind, more generous, and more courageous. Because those are things that I struggle to be. So
lovely. Tell us a little bit. People will know you because you speak sometimes at the Forge, and I know that you have other roles and responsibilities. But for people that don't know, just tell us. So, how many days do you work for the Forge, and what is your role?
So I'm contracted to work 3 days, though in this environment of lockdown, I'm now currently only working 2 because I've been furloughed for the other one. But I normally work 3 days for the Forge. My role is I oversee, so my title is Discipleship Director, which basically means I oversee any ways that people would connect or grow with God. So at the moment, the primary way that is for us as a church is through Sundays, which I don't have much to do with, but through groups. So I oversee groups. That's the 10-week groups that we're currently running. That was the 10-month groups. That's running mates. Any opportunity where people can come together and learn and go deeper in their faith. That's kind of what I'm involved in doing and looking at, as how do we do that? How can we grow in our faith better as we come and do community together?
Yeah. And again, we've got so many groups running at the moment, haven't we? How many groups have we got on the go in a minute?
So we've got 32, I think. We did have 33, but we've got 32 running, which is great. Yeah. And they're really, I love the variety.
Yes, so much diversity within them. And again, you don't have to, sign up to our church to be part of groups. If you just look at our website and you see something that appeals to you, then you would be really welcome to come and join one of our groups, wouldn't you?
Yeah, definitely. And especially if there's something like you want to learn. So we've got some courses, we've got stuff about parenting children for a life of faith. We've got a variety of different courses. And I know other people from other churches have signed up to join those courses. So you wouldn't be alone in doing it either.
Yeah, definitely. And so was that something that was always on your heart? You're working for a church. Had that always been something you wanted to do, be part of leading church? Or, what was your pre-Forge story?
So I'm one of those people who's never known what she wanted to do. And so I've kind of fallen into doing what actually I think God's created me to do. Like, it's totally on my heart. This job, like no other, fits with what I'm passionate about. But this is not something where I was like, oh, I really want to do that. Though when I saw this question, I was like, actually, I do remember being about 11 or 12, because I was a Christian. I grew up in a Christian home. So I was a Christian when I was about 7, I became a Christian. And I do remember it being about 11 or 12 and thinking, maybe being a vicar would be a good thing. And I remember my friends laughing and saying that I'd make a good vicar. And now it's funny because I am there, but that hadn't been an intentional thing. And I'm not a vicar. So I kind of laughed when I saw that question. No, my journey to working at the Forge was a varied one. I studied maths at university, so what's that got to do with being in church? I then went and worked for something called the Crown Prosecution Service, who are they basically prosecute the people that the police catch. So I was involved in the criminal system. Wow. That sounds not in the sense of like I was in the criminal system, but I was involved. So I worked in the Crown Court system, and that was fascinating. I loved that. Then I discovered that I'd always wanted to go abroad and do like a gap year experience, but I'd never felt like the timing was right between the normal things of like A levels and then finishing university. And then 2003, I just suddenly felt, no, actually the timing's right. And so in 2004, I gave up my job at the Crown Prosecution Service to go and work in Uganda with an agency called Africa Inland Mission. So I was out there for just under a year and a half.
What were you doing there?
So I worked in their office doing sort of admin stuff. So making sure that the people that were there as missionaries had accommodation, that they had the visas that they needed, that they got flights when they needed to, if they needed to get home urgently, assisting the branch officer basically. So doing admin stuff. And then I came home with the view of going back out, but I needed to do some study before I did that. That was one of the things that AIM said, you needed to do a bit of biblical study. So I came home with the idea of going to Bible college for a year. And then I met Dave, and plans changed. So I then went to Bible college, did a year at Bible college, and then got married to Dave. He was then a youth worker at Cable Methodist Church. So I then got a job at a local organisation called CYM in Ipswich, which did youth work. So then we were both two Christian youth workers, and then I left that role and joined the Forge about 8-9 years ago. So that is my history.
Interesting. Yeah, lots of different experiences along the way.
Yeah.
Fab. You talk about family life and your two boys and campervan adventure, which all sounds really exciting. And you've talked about some of the struggles that have happened over the last few years. But I know that as a family, you've lived with really deep pain, because your first child, Charlotte, died after just a few days. The pain of which I literally cannot imagine. How did you cope at that time?
I think one of the things that I learned is that everybody will have a different journey and a different story with grief. Grief is totally only relatable to your own journey and your own path with it. For us, we coped initially with it fairly well, in the sense of Charlotte was born early because I had something called a placental abruption, which basically meant I was bleeding inside and she needed to come out quickly. But it was I can't remember what the word was, but basically it was a concealed placental abruption. So there was no outward sign that anything was going wrong. And so when we looked back at what happened, we looked back with a sense of, wow, things could have been so different. I could have bled to death, basically, and Dave could have lost both me and her. Very likely that would have happened, because normally you don't sense anything to do with a concealed abruption. So we were like, wow, we got to meet her. And I'm still alive, and we got to have 2 days with our daughter when we may not have been able to. So to start with, when it happened, it was very easy to see where God was in it, in each stage, and how he'd worked in it. That was very easy and really good for us to do. So lots of people found it really odd when we said, in the middle of the circumstances, how amazing God had been to us through it. But really and truly, that was our experience. There were moments where we would pray and we would see an answer to prayer. Even when she died, that was for us an answer to prayer, because she was at the stage where she was very, very sick, very poorly, and the doctor had come and asked us to make a decision to turn the machines off. And I was like, I don't think I have it within me to do that. I just don't want to have to make that decision. And so we prayed and we were like, God, if it's right that she go, please can you just take her? Let me not be the person that has to do that, but can you take her? And literally we just said amen, and there was a knock on the door from the doctor saying, she's going and you need to come and be with her. And so it was like, moments like that, which sound incredibly painful, and they are painful, God is still present in them. And so we were really able to see where he was in the events of her life. And so that made it very easy to cope with it in that window.
Wow.
That's not to say it didn't have a big knock-on effect on me, actually, because it did. And something that I've realized is that I'm somebody who copes really well in an emergency, and I can cope really well for about 6 months after that occasion.
Okay.
But then I kind of implode a little bit after that 6 months. And so that kind of is what happened for me, is that it was really good, and I was really strong with God for quite a time after her death. But then I think I put up a bit of a wall with him, with God. There was a bit of distance. And then we fell pregnant with Finn, and then realized that wasn't going to be an easy pregnancy either, because Finn has a heart condition. And at the time when they discovered the heart condition, I was pregnant and he was in me, and they weren't sure how severe it was, and whether he would actually survive the pregnancy. And so suddenly I was like, here I've lost my daughter, and now you're telling me that I'm pregnant again and I might lose this child. And if I don't lose this child in pregnancy, I don't know what it's going to look like when he's born, and what the journey is here. And suddenly I was like, God, I don't know if I can trust you. I trust you because I've been a Christian all my life, and I trust you. I believe in you, and I believe you're this God, but can I really trust you? And when I pray, what do I pray for? Because I don't always think you give us everything that we ask for. So if I ask you to heal my son and make it okay, I don't actually think I can trust that that's going to be the outcome, because whilst I know that you love me and that you would want that, there are tragedies all around the world where we pray for stuff and it doesn't happen. And so I went on probably about a 5-6 year long journey of really wrestling with that, and being like, I believe you, and I never would have said I wasn't a Christian, but I really knew there was this gap between me and God that was like, I'm going to hold you, far away from me a bit, because I don't know if I can trust you with everything. And that was a very tough thing. But I remember talking to some really good people, one of which said, trust God's always big enough to catch you as you're falling. And I just remember that when we have doubts, it's okay to have doubts, but know that he will catch us. And so to be secure in that. And he did. And the second one was that I can't remember who said it to me. I might have even been Steve Fenning, being like, when things are difficult, don't stop what you know is really important for you still being, okay. So I didn't stop going to church. I didn't stop going to a group. Even though I had these doubts, even though I had these feelings, I wasn't pretending, but I didn't stop going to I didn't stop putting myself in places where God could speak to me. And so it was through that, I was like, I still was able to journey with him. And I think through that gradually built up that trust again, that says, actually, I can trust you, not because I know it's going to be okay, but because I know you're good. That actually your goodness trumps the outcome of this circumstance, and that I can trust that you want good things for me, even if it isn't what I'm imagining for myself. And so that's kind of the journey that I went on with that. Sorry, again, that's a long answer.
That's really interesting, and I think there's lots of that, even if people haven't experienced that loss, and such a devastating loss that you'd had. I think there's so much of what you've just said that people can apply to their own lives, their own struggles, whatever I don't think, I think often we do say, but you've been through something so much worse, and sometimes I think, what people are going through is what they're going through. And I think you've even said it to me, it's not a competition about who's had the biggest pain, but I think those disciplines of just doing the things that we know with our heads are the right thing to do are just so helpful, aren't they?
And that was so 3 weeks ago I did a talk, and I said it at the beginning of the talk, but I kind of almost want to really label it here. The talk that I delivered was a large proportion something that I'd heard Andy Stanley deliver, and it was when I was listening to him deliver a lot of what I said, where he was saying, a lot of the disciples around Jesus' time, they liked the signs, and they liked being there for the miracles and the things that Jesus could do for them, and it was like, don't look at the sign, don't follow the sign, follow the one that it's pointing towards. And that's something that he said and that I said in my talk. And when he said it, I was just really struck by this whole thing of, so often in our Christian walk, we don't mean to, but we live like that. We live with this thing of, but God, I need you to do this A, B, or C, and when you do that, then I follow you. But actually what we're really following is the miraculous that we know he can do in our life. But are we willing to follow him even when it doesn't mean the answer that we think it could be? And when I listened to that talk, I was like, I think that we're all going through an element of that at the moment in COVID, because life is not how we wanted it to be. And there is no gradation of loss. I think we're all grieving things. And I think actually over 2021 and even probably 2022, we're going to be dealing with the loss and the grief that we will feel from this last year, whether that be that we've lost somebody physically, or just the loss of the things that we'd hoped we were going to do in that year, and all the contact that we would have had, or the ability to hug somebody for a year. You know, there's loads of losses that we've experienced this year, but are we willing to follow the man Jesus, or are we just looking for the sign of what he can do for us at this time? And I think for me, that was one of the biggest challenges. And
And I think as church, when church is happening so differently, and I think there's a loss there of that whole community feel and that coming together, and something that we experience through doing church together, we've lost for now. And we're finding all sorts of other ways to do it differently. But I think, again, it brings into play what you're saying, that actually our personal relationship with Jesus is what is fundamental now. And I think this time is kind of shining a light on it. And if you haven't got it, or if it was dependent on the doing church, then of course you're going to feel a massive loss now, because that was probably disproportionate. And we would so encourage people to do what you're saying, just invest time in spending time with Jesus, read, pray, listen to music, podcasts, anything that really fills you and enables that relationship with Jesus. We could, rather than like when we all come back together, whatever that looks like, rather than coming back feeling like really thirsty and really like desperate for that meeting, there's the potential that we could all come back so strong as Christians and so on fire, because we've all really, really dug deep into relationship with Jesus during this time. That's the potential there, isn't it?
Definitely. And wouldn't that be incredible if we came back full with so much to give, rather than desperate and needing so much? And there'll be some of us where we're desperate and need that. You know, back in July last year, that's where I was at, and that was okay. That was where I was at in my journey. And so if you're in that place, it's okay to be really desperate in need, but we also have to understand we have a role and a responsibility ourselves to step into that and to seek that and to look for it. One of the things that's really helped me in all of that is a level of accountability. So, you know, one of the things that I think is really hard, we can have best laid plans of mice and men, and then suddenly, you know, getting up at 4 o'clock doesn't look appealing. Like this morning, I sat under my duvet and was like, I don't want to get up. I don't want to get up and have my quiet time. But then I remembered that what I've done is I have this relationship with a lady where I write to her about, every morning I write to her about what I've read in my quiet time. And it was that got me out of bed. It wasn't the fact that I knew this was going to be amazing for me and good for me today to do. It was, no, I've committed to this lady that I'm going to write to her. And so that's what got me. So we need accountability to it. We need somebody who's going to walk alongside us to do that, so that we don't always stay under our duvet.
Yeah, I think you're so right. Definitely. Oh, Emily, it's been so lovely to chat to you. You're really inspiring. I always feel so much better after I've had conversation with you. You really give me lots to think about. So I'm really grateful that you've made time to chat today. I've just got one last question. So if I could, and unfortunately I can't, if I could just magic you away for a week with absolutely no restrictions, so all the things that are in place now, gone. If that was all gone, where would you go? What would you do? And who would you do it with?
Oh, there's so many places I'd want to go. But one of my favourite places in the world is Sydney in Australia. And so, I would take me and my family and my sister and her family would go to Sydney, Australia, and we'd be there. That's where I would go.
Just imagine for a moment.
A little bit of beach time, a little bit of city time, sunshine, warmth. Yeah.
Just definitely. Go a long way away. Wonderful. Well, maybe the dream will happen before too long. Let's hold on to the hope. Or maybe you'll be in your camper van on the drive having a sleepover.
That's likely to happen in the next 2 weeks, definitely.
Thanks, Emily, so much for chatting. It's just been absolutely wonderful. Thank you. See you
That's
soon.
all right.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.